السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم, dear brothers and sisters. This topic, is a huge topic. There's a lot of. Oh, that's okay. We'll start in 1 minute, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Ahsan. Jazakallah khair for your support. So, this is a large topic. Obviously, I'm not gonna. Let me try to frame what I'm gonna talk about. So, in terms of the religious obligation of caring for our parents, I think, alhamdulillah, we have such clarity in our religion about the importance of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until the end of the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it super clear that being our very best to our parents is at the highest level of importance by mentioning it right after not committing shirk or worshipping, associating others with Allah. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So, alhamdulillah, we leave this topic for our religious scholars, mashallah, Sheikh Ahsan, and I'm sure many of you heard many khutbahs in your lifetime about the importance of caring for your parents. So, I'm definitely not going to focus on that. The assumption is that all of us value that extremely highly, and we just want to know how to do it. So also the Quran provides us guidance in terms of the mannerism and some of the conduct that we should do in terms of what is birrul walidain, in terms of some examples. So that's also, alhamdulillah, we have sufficient input on that, and that's not what I'm going to discuss. What I will discuss is how do we go about it from a practical perspective at this day and time and place, and what are some of the things that we have to be aware of, what is our responsibility, and what is sort of the mindset we need to have when we approach this topic to actually end up in the place? What does birrul walidain mean when you are in a particular situation? That is what I'm going to try to cover, inshallah, also at a high level. So, who here is a caregiver? By show of hands. Who is a caregiver? Just 3 brothers here. Okay. So, a caregiver is someone who provides care and assistance and attention to someone else. So it could be a child, it could be another person who has a disability, another adult, or it could be an older adult. So it could be a senior person. This care may be provided directly by handing the person something or doing something, or it could be provided by calling them and checking on them. So let's try that again. Who here is a caregiver? The same brothers? I would expect that most of you are caregivers. So the importance of that is understanding first, acknowledging that we are caregivers. This individual, again, may not be living with you, may be living in a different place, may be living in a different country, but you are interested in their well-being, and you are vested in that, and you perform some level of effort to make sure they are okay. So I imagine, frankly, that every single person here is a caregiver. Even grandparents oftentimes take the role of caring for their grandchildren, right? So everyone is performing some level of care. It is very important to initially understand that you are a caregiver so that you can start to embody what are the responsibilities of a caregiver. A lot of people don't identify themselves as a caregiver. So let me kind of backtrack. My name is Mohamed Hasan, and about 6 years ago, I decided to leave the technology field where I was working for maybe 16 years and start a business that helps seniors in their home by doing caregiving. My wife and I actually, I have to say she's an equal partner, and her and I started this with the intention of helping and also making money, inshallah, as an entrepreneur opportunity. Social entrepreneurship is a great field, and it is possible to do good and make money. The two things can actually be combined. And inshallah, that's something, if you want, we can talk about. And I highly encourage all of our youth and those who are interested in doing something like that to look for a business opportunity and to start a business, inshallah. I'm sure many of you have thought about that at one point or another if you work in corporate America. So with respect to caregiving, some people are natural caregivers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just give them the inclination, and they figure their way, Others need a little bit of guidance. So today we're going to talk about aging and caregiving. We're going to discuss some statistics so we can kind of understand the importance of this topic and the relevance. And we'll talk about some of the fears that we naturally feel as we age. We'll talk about the need to age in place, and I'll define that, and some of the challenges related to that, activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living. And we'll talk about changes that occur as we age and some of the challenges and suggestions. And we'll talk about end of life. Alhamdulillah, in our faith, I do these kinds of presentations in different places, and there's always a very touchy topic when you start to talk about end of life. But alhamdulillah, with us Muslims, we are comfortable with the idea that we will all be under, inshallah, one day. May Allah protect us. So aging and caregiving. Aging obviously is a process of getting older, and the changes that it brings. And changes, I view them, as we get older, physically we are going to change. And these changes are inevitable. they are going to happen. We should have an attitude of embracing those changes and making lifestyle or environmental changes to accommodate for those changes that are naturally happening to us. This is very important, and I'll talk more about this as we go. Some people, adapt very well in life, and others resist change. And I think a lot of people resist change to begin with, but some do better at adapting to it. And some need a little bit of help, So if that person that is changing and needs to adapt is your parent or is your loved one, your role perhaps could be to help them cope with that change. And we'll talk about that. In America, and frankly maybe even globally, there's work life and then there's retirement. In work life, you have a lot of guidance. If your parents, your peers, your friends will give you guidance when you need it. You can say, what do you think is a good field for me to study? People, and there's also career coaching, there's counseling, there's a lot of things. Unfortunately, retirement is not something we put a lot of focus on. We put a lot of focus from the financial aspect. When people say retirement planning, most of us kind of defer to the topic of financially saving money for my retirement. But I feel that retirement planning should involve a lot more things. There's social aspects that have to be planned for. Where am I going to live? Am I going to be able to get to things when I don't drive, for example? So these are all things that have to be planned for with respect to retirement. So there's many aspects other than financial. Your role as a caregiver, and I assume, again, most of you are caregivers, is to support the adaptation of these changes. I wanted to kind of frame that idea to begin with, and then we can build on it, inshallah. So kind of we'll pause on the caregiving and just kind of understand the general aging. There's a concept called the silver tsunami. The silver tsunami is basically the rate at which we are aging. There are more people 65 and older than ever today. Obviously, there's more people than ever today, period. But, we are really aging well now. During the next 40 years, so right now there's about 1 in 7 over 65. During the next 40 years, the number of people 65 will double, and those who are 85 will triple. By the year 2040, 1 out of 4 people will be over 65. So this is a huge number. Imagine, there'll be a lot more seniors. I mean, there's already a lot today, but we're, aging at that rate, and that's the prediction. And there's a slide next to this one that kind of goes over that. Never has life expectancy been so high. Never before have so many people lived so far away from their homes. This is now the phenomena, right? Most people have to travel to go to school or to work away from their parents. So, the need for support is there, and it's increasing. So you see in this slide how, especially at the last, maybe 3 bars, you see how it jumps from into, so this is the number of people, this is the number of persons 65 and older in millions, and at the bottom, so on this side, on the x-axis, you have, on the y-axis, you have the number of people, and then on the horizontal, you have the years. So in the year 2010, there's 40 million people who are over 65. In 2020, it jumps almost 15 million. In 2030, it jumps another almost 20 million. So this is kind of illustrates what I was talking about in terms of the silver tsunami. So this is a population that is growing, and And this issue is important today, and it will continue to increase in importance. Okay, so most people, if you ask them, where would you rather be as you get older? Most people will say, I would like to stay in my home. Most people would like to be in their home. This is not specific to a culture. This is cross-cultural. Everybody prefers to continue to be in their home, close to their family. In fact, the AARP found that 90% of older Americans want to age in their home for as long as possible. So no one really looks forward for moving to an assisted living or any other type of arrangement. This is our mission, with the company I work with, is to kind of help that happen through services and things. Aging in place has challenges. It represents challenges. It's highly desired, right, as an option, and it has many benefits, but it also represents challenges because someone's ability to age in place has to kind of be assessed and possibly managed when some things become difficult to do. So we'll talk about that in the next few slides. There's a concept called activities of daily living. These are the things that we do on a daily basis to self-care, activities that we perform on a daily basis. Things like eating, bathing, dressing, walking around, transitioning off the bed, into the shower, into the car, and personal hygiene, brushing teeth, combing hair, using the toilet independently. So with respect to eating, sometimes the appetite changes as we age. Sometimes people have decreased appetite. Malnutrition is actually a very common reason why someone would be checked into the hospital if they are an older person. So there's old and there's old. So old is like over 65 until like 85, and old is like someone who's in their 85 or older. So sometimes there might be, with respect to feeding, there might be trouble with swallowing because naturally as we age, there's something called dysphagia, and dysphagia means that there's going to be a deterioration in the swallowing ability. And if that happens, then that, eating is going to be a bit of an issue. Sometimes there's inability to use utensils, to grab things, because of maybe arthritis or other conditions. Sometimes people don't want to eat alone, right? So if the person is by themselves, they may not be motivated to eat well. So it's important to understand these challenges because, again, going back to you being in the position of helping someone, these things may happen. So you should expect them, and if they do happen, you should figure out how to deal with them so that the person continues to nurture themselves, the way they should or the way they have been. Bathing and cleaning one's body, sometimes people develop fear of water. Sometimes people have reluctance to take a shower. Sometimes taking a shower in their home is difficult. The shower to get in is too high. They can't stand for too long. There are limitations that creep up as we age. So we have to be mindful of that. Dressing sometimes can be a challenge. If you have an injury on your left shoulder, for example, it's hard to put a jacket on. If you have arthritis, it's hard to button things. So I deal with a lot of, adult children, people whose parents are aging, and they come to problems like this, and they are baffled. They're like, I'm not sure what to do here. And that's what I'm trying to talk to you about. Anticipating some of these things will make you a little bit more prepared in dealing with them. These things happen as we age. Personal hygiene, brushing teeth might be a problem. Some people have, dentures. They have to put on, they have to maintain a set of teeth. Arthritis, again, could be a problem in doing that. Using the toilet could be a problem. Sometimes the toilet is too low. People sit on it and they have a hard time getting up. So all these problems could be remedied. There are tools out there to make the toilet seat higher, to put a frame around the toilet, and now you can, push from an even, stable surface. I meet people sometimes, they grab the toilet paper holder and the sink on the other side, and these things put them at risk because they can fall, these things can break, and disappoint them. So tools are important. The environment where the person is aging has to continue to change, to evolve, to allow them to continue to be safe, and for things to be still doable. There's so that was activities of daily living. There's instrumental activities of daily living, and these are things that are sort of higher level activities that we do to maintain our lives, such as maintaining our finances, handling transportation, shopping, preparing meals. So this not eating, but actually making the meal, using the telephone, managing medications, housework, light housekeeping. All these things are things that can present challenges over time. So with respect to finances, sometimes, so normally, you don't have to worry about your parents paying their bills, right? But in some cases, they may start forgetting, So forgetfulness could get in the way and could cause them to miss payments, pay fees, hurt their credit. These things are possible. Or sometimes they're overpaying. They're sending 3 payments for the same payment, and losing money. So it's important to try to maybe get them set up with bill pay, automated bill pay. If you use that, maybe you can help them with their finances. You can help them set things up in a way that things work automatically. So normally you don't think of that as helping your parents. And oftentimes problems happen before we do that. But maybe that's something you can think about today, It's not necessarily our age versus their age. This can work for everyone, We just need to kind of change the mindset that helping my parents doesn't necessarily mean always take someone by the hand and help them, move. Sometimes helping them means doing things like that, setting up bill pay, setting them up with a grocery delivery service, All these are things that you can do, and you have to associate them with how to cope with the changes that they are dealing with. Transportation is a huge problem. You have to take time off work to be able to help your parents get to their appointments, things like that. You have all done it. We have all done it. That's, alhamdulillah, it's a great opportunity. But there's also other options. You can set them up with Uber. You can call Uber on their behalf. You can have someone else take them. So it's important when you recognize your role as a caregiver to try to find tools and means and resources and even other people to help you not become a dependency for your parents. You want to make sure that you are an option, not the only option. Sometimes these relationships develop, some codependency relationships where they only will do something if you are available or if you were to do it. You are not only setting yourself up for, having a lot of tension in your life, because obviously it's a very high priority to help your parents, but you may be a sandwich generation. You may have your own family. You have your own children. So do not make them dependent on you. Give them other options. Allow them access to the community through other means, other people than you. So Uber, Dial-A-Ride, Access California, some of you have heard of these things and use these things. All these are options that are out there that they should have access to. Shopping, obviously, sometimes becomes a problem because they have to stand for too long, or they have to drive to get to the store. They have trouble carrying everything. So there are services for that. Cooking, preparing meals. Sometimes, as we age, cooking becomes a challenge. And my mom, for example, says, I've been cooking for 55 years. I want to take a break, you know. And that is her right, you know. She has done this for many, many, many years. She still has ability to do it, but it has diminished from before. And sometimes there's no ability to do it anymore. So oftentimes people will kind of resort to buying pre-prepared meals. These meals will get you by, but they have high sodium. They bring in problems as well. You know, they will present challenges. Make sure your parents are okay with respect to meals. And you know, there's many solutions on that. Obviously, I'm sure you can kind of come up with something that works for them and for you. But the nutrition that we have as we age, frankly, you really have to pay a lot of attention to what folks eat, you know, because sometimes it's not good for them, and especially at that age, you know, whether it's very high, you know, fat content or sugar content or salt content, or these things their body is not going to process it the way it used to. Using the telephone, make sure the telephone always works. Telephone is a safety tool. You know, if someone is in trouble, they need help, they have to be able to call for help. So sometimes you get there, they use a wireless phone, it's out of charge, or you know, it's not plugged in, or things like that. Make sure, pay attention to the phone. Make sure they always have a phone they can easily use. You can buy them the nicest iPhone, but if they have trouble using it, you're not really helping them. They need to be able to use the tool, okay? Managing medications can become a challenge at some point in time. I think it's actually very important for you to be familiar with what medications they take, how often they should take them. Obviously, you want to go with them to the doctor to understand any changes in medication. What is their health conditions? You should know their diagnosis. You should know what is happening with them and how does that affect their life. These are all things that we don't necessarily connect with as birrul walidain, but these things are birrul walidain, you know. I guess modern day interpretation, you know, of that. Housework and basic home maintenance, you know, sometimes bending becomes a problem, right? Standing up for too long becomes a problem. You know, you don't want them to get on a ladder or a chair to try to clean something, change a light bulb, you know, things like that. You have to be kind of available and supportive, and maybe hire a service, maybe get someone to help them. Maybe you're not available to do it and such, but you want them to have means of doing it. You don't want them to become sort of desperate about it or neglect it, right? So, you know, there's cleaning services, there's handymen out there. You maybe take the role of the facilitator in some of these things. So, activities of daily living, instrumental activities of daily living. Eating, managing finances, all these are different areas. So it could be overwhelming that you have to potentially help with many of those things if they don't live with you, or if they live with you, sometimes you have to help with a variety of these things. So how do you do it, right? Going back to the idea of change, you know, there's denial, and then there's acceptance, and then there's adaptation. You know, these challenges that occur, you know, are things we need to adapt to. One thing that is very, very important when you work with someone, when you try to be of service to someone, is to understand their fears and motivations. Those two are very key things in driving action. You do a lot of things because you are afraid of something or because you are motivated to do something. So one of the key things is to understand what are the fears that we all face as we age. And this, again, is cross-cultural. This applies to everyone in every culture. Most of us fear the most, what we fear the most is loss of independence. If you ask anyone, they will give you this answer, maybe in a different way. Most of us worry about not being able to drive anymore, not being able to walk anymore, not being able to make decisions anymore, not being able to remember anymore. All of these things affects your and impact your independence. And this naturally becomes the number one fear, from cross-cultural perspective. Most people also, before I go on, so if someone is fearing their loss of independence, they may become very sensitive about this topic. If it ever becomes an issue, they may be very sensitive. You have to understand that this is something they worry about a lot. And because they worry about it a lot, you have to keep it in your mind that I'm going to try to always maintain the idea that you are independent. I am just doing this for now. Or this person is going to just help with this part, but then you continue to do everything else the way you always do it. Impoverishment is another concern and fear as we age. People worry about outlasting their funds, outlasting their money. So I run out of money before I die. A lot of people worry about that, right? So they become very, very worried about spending, right? So sometimes to the point that they don't spend on something that they really need, right? So that is something you need to anticipate. If you are caring for someone who's aging, you need to understand that the way they deal with money is going to change over time, and you should expect that. And obviously, a lot of people worry about losing their mind, subhanAllah, in many of the east side of the world, there's less of that. But a lot of people worry about that. So these fears are based on research. Understanding them is going to help you work with someone better. And when I say work with them, I mean be able to kind of understand how to deal with approaching them, where they're coming from. Going back to the idea of change, sometimes, things change, right? Things are going to change for sure. Change is the only thing for sure, right? Some people say that. So sometimes as we age, these changes occur or kind of are inevitable. The immune system weakens. So that means we could get sick, easier or longer or both. The amount of acid in the stomach decreases as we age naturally. And the acid in the stomach actually breaks down the food and also attacks and kills the bacteria that we consume. So what this means is that you can eat something that has a high level of bacteria and it can cause you problems. But hopefully this would not happen if you are younger. So essentially you could eat the same meal with someone who is 90 years old and they can get sick and you don't get sick. So that is something that is going to change. And that means we have to be more careful with food. We have to wash our fruits and vegetables very thoroughly. We have to cut out the bruised parts and the things that have bacteria in them. Right now, even if the fruit is has damaged parts, I like to eat the whole thing. I don't like to throw away any part. But you have to change that mindset as you age because you're going to get sick easier. Vision changes, our sight. Sight is key because sight is going to impact falling. So let me draw you this picture. Falling and malnutrition and dehydration. These are three main reasons why someone gets admitted to the hospital, someone who is a senior. So these things are areas you have to be careful of. Falling, malnutrition, and dehydration. Obviously, health problems like congestive heart failure, things like that, obviously these are also key. But these are things that, outside of chronic illnesses. So vision should be checked once every year. Even if you have prescription glasses, the vision changes. Sometimes it actually gets better. I've seen people who, as they age, their vision gets better and they don't need the glasses anymore. but it should be checked just to make sure, because this is your parents' gateway to seeing the word, right? So you have to make sure it's clear. Hearing is another gateway to the word. So hearing should be checked every 2 years. If you go to a place that sells hearing aids and you say, I'm having hearing trouble, they will sell you hearing aids. These things are expensive and they make money doing it. But what you want is you want to possibly, if your parent is experiencing some hearing problems, take them to a hearing and balance doctor. Have them check their ears thoroughly, do testing, not the primary doctor, hearing and balance doctor, because that's their expertise. Sometimes there's wax buildup, and that can cause hearing loss. So it could be a conductive problem. It may not necessarily be a loss in the function itself of hearing. So that should be checked once every 2 years, hearing. Medication. With medications, you want to understand what diagnosis they have. You want to understand what medications are needed for those illnesses. You want to know the dosage. You want to know how these medications affect them, what side effects they have, and you really, let me ask you a question. So if you have a problem with your medication, who do you go to? Doctor. Who said pharmacist? Yes, exactly. So the doctor obviously knows medication, but you really want, if you have issues with medication, pharmacists understand medicine better, and that is their field. So you can take all the medications that your parent is taking and take them to a pharmacist and say, okay, this is what they're taking. This is the dosage. Do you see any problems? Do you see room for conflict? Do you see any dosages too high? Another thing about medication is that sometimes, and I have seen this, seniors sort of accumulate medications as they age. So you find someone taking 11 pills every day, and some of these pills are no longer necessary. They were at some point, but they're not today. You want to make sure that they are taking what they need to take. So medication is key, because medication is going to change their body chemistry, is going to impact their energy level, their clarity level, a lot of things, blood pressure, all these things are going to influence how they are feeling and what they're able or not able to do. So that's key. You have to be involved in that area. Continuing the concept of things change. We talked about health changes. Now we're going to talk a little bit about physical changes. The bodily functions deteriorate. The muscles, you have muscle atrophy. The muscles get weaker. Potentially, if there's lack of exercise. You can exercise at any age. At any age, you can do some level of exercise. The only problem is our perception of exercise is the problem. We think of exercise as lifting weights and running and stuff like that. But there's many forms of exercise. Stretching is exercise. Stretching is a really important form of exercise. So there's different forms of exercise, and there's always things that we can do to maintain our body's strength and ability at any age, and even improve at very advanced age. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Low bone density is an issue. If someone has low bone density, they're going to have high likelihood of breaking something if they fall. So you have to, as one presentation I attended, it was done by an orthopedist. He said you have to feed your bones. Your bones need nutrition. And thinking about that, takes a second to kind of digest that. But there are foods, not necessarily only medication, like taking calcium and vitamin D pills, but there are foods that are going to be good for your bones. And fat is actually not good for your bones, because fat gets your body to develop acid, and acid is going to counter any sort of calcium you're eating. So you want to make sure you have good sources of vitamin D, like high dense green, like grape leaves, broccoli. Vegetables, some vegetables are high in vitamin D, and they don't have the fat, so therefore you're going to benefit from a large percentage from that versus the fat, like in a salmon fish, for example, has high vitamin D, but then it has fat, so they may counter each other. The skin gets thinner as we get older. And this is something that you kind of like don't think about much, but it's an important thing, because if the skin gets very thin, what happens is the fat layers underneath the skin start dissolving, right? So you could easily get a cut, right? From simple things. I've seen it happen from very simple things. Someone has a really bad cut, and you can see the bone, and it occurred from something that, before in age, that would not have been an issue. So we have to be careful of that. And some people take blood thinners or aspirin. That's going to make them. One brother the other day in the masjid here, he takes a blood thinner, and he had a cut, and he was bleeding like crazy. So now you're more prone to have a skin tear, and you're more prone to bleed. So these things sometimes kind of get exacerbated, so it seems like not a big problem, but it can be for someone. Incontinence obviously is something no one wants to deal with, but it may happen. And if it happens, loss of bowel movement or bladder movement, and someone can involuntarily go. But there are things and tools they can use. So you have to look into that. How can I help them? Because let's say they have incontinence, they will become isolated. They will not want to leave the house because they say, I go to the bathroom all the time. Don't allow that to get in the way of them having access to the word, to getting out. There are tools and means and ways. Depends, wearing depends, things like that can help. As I talked about before, the swallowing function can deteriorate, and that causes choking. So if you notice, you have a meal with your parent, you notice that they are choking frequently. That is something you have to be mindful of, because changes may need to happen to their diet. There are simple solutions also for this problem. Sometimes they choke just on water. Some people choke a lot on water. But notice these things. Pay attention to the changes that are happening to themselves, to their environment, to their behavior, because these changes may be signs of a problem coming up. Obviously, there's also cognitive changes, memory, dementia, Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a progressive disease. It kills the person eventually. It takes about 5 to 10 years, and it basically causes plaques and tangles to build up in the brain, sort of choking the brain cells. So, the brain cells, basically the brain is extremely complex, right? There is billions of cells, and they have trillions of connections between one another. And those connections is what allows the thinking and the judgment and all these things, and even mobility and, all these things to happen. So if these cells need nutrition, they need glucose, they need oxygen to be able to continue to work. That is their nutrition. So Alzheimer's builds like plaques around them, cutting them off from other cells and cutting the supply of nutrition to them. So that's essentially what happens in Alzheimer's, and it continues to progress in the brain, attacking different areas in the brain. Initially memory, judgment, language, so someone may not be able to speak anymore, and then eventually even breathing, right? The part of the brain that affects the breathing. But dementia is not like Alzheimer's. Dementia is sort of an umbrella term that just talks about someone essentially losing their memory or making odd decisions. When people have dementia or Alzheimer's, it almost needs training for you to really understand how to deal with them. There's a lot of detail in this area. But if you realize that, they are forgetful, you want to take them to a neurologist. It's important to understand if there is a diagnosis. Not the general doctor or the primary doctor or the family doctor, but you want to take them to a neurologist, someone who is specialized in the brain. And maybe sometimes, by the way, you feel like someone is losing their mind or having dementia, but it could be depression. It could be dehydration. They are completely dehydrated. They cannot, and that happens. It happens here a lot because we have good weather, and people don't drink enough water, and that can cause dehydration. It's very common with seniors. So there could be reasons causing this, and it could be essentially temporarily memory loss or amnesia or something. So anxiety is huge. Anxiety is something you have to be familiar with. You have to be able to identify. As we get older, anxiety grows. So if today you are the type of person who worries a lot, you kind of sit like this and you are thinking about all the things that could happen in the future or all the things that have happened wrong in the past, you will be better at that as you get older, and you will worry even more. You have to attack that. You have to, combat that. Don't allow that to control you, and consume brain, from your brain. Focus on the now and the today. What can I do now? Anxiety grows with age, and anxiety actually can consume the person's mind. So they could be walking, but not paying attention to their surroundings, and their mind is consumed with something else. That is going to conflict with safety. They're not going to be safe because their mind is not there. They're focused on something else. Frankly, I've seen it like people who are very anxious. It does affect their lifestyle. It does affect people around them. So anxiety is key, and it's important to recognize that someone is getting anxious. Seniors get anxious when they have to go see the doctor, when they have to do things. So anticipating that is important. It's important for you to understand that, my parent is going to get anxious when I tell them this. So maybe you don't tell them, or maybe you are careful how you tell them, or maybe you tell them but you say, but please don't worry, I will take care of it. Okay? Address the anxiety, because anxiety can cause them to lose sleep. Sheikh, how much time do we have? We're good? Okay. So anxiety can affect, if they lose sleep, it's going to, get this. If you don't sleep well at night because you're going to the bathroom a lot or you're worried about something, you are going to be pretty tired the next day. Some people can handle that. They're their body really is kind of used to that, but it's still not good, obviously. It makes them age faster, honestly, and it just puts a lot of pressure on their brain and their heart. But let's say someone who's older now, next day has an appointment. They have to drive and go somewhere. Now the likelihood of them falling asleep while driving is higher. The likelihood of falling is higher because the energy is going to be fluctuating. It's going to affect even the clarity of their mind. Your brain needs time, needs like good, solid few hours of sleep so it can kind of rebuild and rest. And if you don't provide that, it's going to really affect the quality of life on the next day, and it's going to be dangerous for the individual. So anxiety seems like, they just worry too much. Seems like an issue that is not a big deal, but it is a big deal, and you want to talk about it. And there's even medications for anxiety. I'm not here to really advocate for using medication in general, but you need to have a solution, for a problem that could become a serious problem. Okay, so what are some of the things you should look out for? You should look for hearing difficulty, right? We talked about that. Hearing is something that is going to really impact an individual's quality of life. What happens is, if I don't hear you well, I'm going to ask you to repeat. If you show any sign of discomfort by repeating, then I'm going to stop asking you to repeat. Then I'm going to stop talking to you. People get isolated when they have hearing problems because they stop caring about people, repeating to them and them not hearing and all that. They disengage, okay? So hearing while it seems like, they don't hear too well, but they still hear me when I yell at them. That's not good, right? You don't want that. You don't want to yell at all, right? That is clear in the Quran, but also in some cases, actually yelling makes them hear less if they have tinnitus or some kind of a hearing problem. So you want to take them to the doctor and see if there's an issue, a diagnosis, or wax buildup or anything like that. The feet are very important. If they have pain in their feet, if they have neuropathy, there's something called a doctor called a podiatrist. That's their specialty. They specialize in feet. If they have any problem with sensation, loss of sensation in their feet, or the nails are growing into the flesh, things like that, you should take them to a podiatrist. Because if you step and by stepping you have like a small shock of pain, you may take the weight off the leg and now they can fall. So if they complain about their feet, that's important. You have to pay attention to that. Isolation is, elder abuse is important. It's important to recognize what elder abuse is. Elder abuse in most of people's minds seem like, okay, somebody is like causing harm to them. But it may not necessarily be that. It's not actually defined as that. Just causing a high risk of harm, like leaving your parents in a home that cannot be locked. The lock is broken. That is elder abuse, legally, because you are basically the primary caregiver or the person responsible for the older adult has to make sure that they are they are taken care of from the respect of protection, health care, food, and there was one more thing, but protection is one of them. So you have to make sure they are safe. They're not they're not being on harm's way. Isolation is key. Don't allow your loved ones as they age to get isolated from the society because they don't drive anymore or because of things like that. Make changes, create solutions, provide tools. Maybe not only you yourself, like we discussed earlier, but maybe you designate, like, okay, I take care of going to the doctor, my brother takes care of taking them to the masjid, my sister or my neighbor or my friend. So create resources for them. If you see your parents using the walls and the furniture as they walk, that is a big problem. They have a balance issue. And that's a good way, that's a good sign. So if you see them start to walk and then they grab something and then they grab another thing, they need to have a walker or a cane. They need a source of balance outside of their feet. And this is not, again, one of the major reasons someone can get admitted to the hospital is falling. So you want to pay attention to that. Don't allow that to continue to be a habit now, because these things they rest on will disappoint them. Their perception of how far these things will change. And the lighting will affect, all these things will affect. Okay, what you should keep in mind, the brain also needs exercise, just like the body. So, there are a lot of ways to exercise the brain. Conversation, social conversation is a way of exercising the brain. Talking about good old times, and then there's like a bunch of things like board games, and there's a lot of brain games and things like that. All these are ways to exercise the brain. Inactivity is a huge problem. Being inactive is going to cause someone to lose flexibility, range of motion, and strength. So if you say, well, they just like to watch TV, and that's what they enjoy now, let me just let them enjoy what they want to enjoy. That's not good, right? Because that means they are going to decline faster from a physical perspective. They are going to get weaker. How much time do I have? Just so I know. Yeah, we're good? Okay. Pay attention to their activity level. There are different types of activity. Again, we talked earlier about exercise. So exercise doesn't necessarily mean they are running on the treadmill, right? Maybe it means walking. Gardening is a form of exercise. Actually, gardening is found to be one of the things that people who age very well, even into their 100 years, have in common. This is something that they have studied across cultures to see where people are aging well and still have their faculties and still healthy. One of the key things was that they, do something like that, and they walk a lot. So walking is key. Walk with your parents. Maybe you don't have time to walk with them. Find someone who can walk with them. Make sure they are walking. There are walking clubs here. There's clubs of people who just get together to walk. So there's a lot of solutions out there, and I think you can see a pattern by now. The pattern is that to care for your parents, you must be prepared with two things. One is you have to anticipate problems and recognize issues. You have to see that, okay, this is not looking good. The second thing is you have to have information. You have to know, how can I deal with that? Or who do I reach out for? Like example, when I said, if you feel like memory is not good, take them to a neurologist. Information like this is key. So what you have to work on over time, and this is not something you're going to learn from your job or from taking care of your kids. This is something you have to seek out. Information that will help you help them cope with these changes, right? So gaining knowledge is birrul walidain when it comes to what are the things that happen as we age and how to deal with them. Get to know your parents' neighbors. Neighbors are very important. There are people who can help you check on them if they're not answering the phone. There are people who will give you information, like, by the way, someone seems to be coming by a lot and I'm not sure about their intentions. There are people who are going to protect them and help them and provide them with things they need. They may have a language barrier, Your parent may not really get to know their neighbors because, they feel the culture is different, but there are good people everywhere. And you have to think of the neighbor of your parents as an important resource, and then you can treat it that way. And obviously, alhamdulillah, our deen, advise us to do that. But their neighbors are actually a very good source of information. The last time I did this presentation in a masjid, one sister asked me, she said, my parents live back home. A lot of what you're talking about, kind of are things that require observation. What can I do? I said, you have to develop allies on the ground. You have to develop relationships with people on the ground who can help you, who can do the things that you would need to do. So some of those people may be family. Some of those people may be their neighbors. Some of those people may be your own friends. Do things that are beneficial for these people. Send them gifts, pay them to help your parents. Make sure you are developing sources of information about your parents other than them. Most of us think of our kids as the best people in the world. And it's actually the opposite is also true. Most of us kind of envision our parents in a certain sort of standard. And unfortunately, things change, right? So you think that, my dad always used to, go and do the grocery by foot and so on. But, maybe your father cannot do that anymore. So there is denial about what our parents can and cannot do. It's important to know truth. You need the facts. They may not tell you the facts. They may say, no, everything is fine, alhamdulillah, everything is good. But you need to know people who live close to them. And you need those people to have a way of contacting you and telling you, what, I am noticing this, I am worried about this or that. So this would be useful if you don't live close to your parents. Obviously, falling, as I mentioned earlier, is a big problem. You want to make sure they live in a safe environment. And that environment continues to be safe. Things on the way, furniture, on the way, rugs. Rugs are one of the main reasons people fall in their home, And some people love their rugs, They have the small rugs, the throw rugs. they stitch the whole place with them. They make it, they care about these rugs. But these rugs can really break their hip. So you have to pay attention to the environment they live in. Are they able to access things? Are they able to reach things? Are they able to be comfortable in this environment, or they have to go through hardship? Like I said earlier about the shower, for example, getting into the shower. If that's a problem, you can put a grab bar next to the area where they stand, and then they can grab on that and then get in. If they have trouble standing for too long, then you can put a chair. There's something called a shower chair. You can put that inside the shower, and that will be a way for them to be able to sit while taking a shower, the whole time or part of the time, or when they get tired. So there's a lot of tools and means out there, but you have to. And another thing actually that's really, I think, starting to become clear in this conversation is that you have to develop good communication with them. They have to be comfortable telling you what's going on with them. So if they feel they have to hide things from you, like not telling you if they're having trouble with something because you will worry so much, or you will say, okay, no, we have to change the living situation, which they don't want, for example. That's going to get in the way of you being able to help them. So birr al-walidain in this case requires that you have good communication, honesty with them, and get them to feel comfortable talking to you about what's changing, right? We said helping them requires you to notice these changes and help them adapt to them. But if you're not noticing the changes and all of a sudden you have a surprise, then you can't help, or your help comes after the problem, okay? So, I talked about blood thinners and how they can make someone bleed really fast. So if they have to take a blood thinner because they have a heart condition, make sure you minimize the likelihood of getting a skin tear or a cut. Socially, there are challenges. Being connected with others is vital, Maybe your parent living with you in your home is very important for you, but maybe for them, living next to the masjid is more important. You have to figure out how they can be socially connected with their friends, with their peers. Most of us work long hours. It is, in my opinion at least, not birr al-walidain to force your parent to live with you and deprive them of company for 10 hours a day, because you require that for the remaining hours, which most of them were sleeping, that they are with you. If you cannot be there for them, make sure someone else can be there for them, and make sure they are connected. They are not isolated. Social isolation often happens after retirement, and if people are not driving, it's very likely that they get isolated. Isolation can lead to depression, and I think that's some of the areas where our community struggles is not having enough knowledge in the areas of mental illness and what are the things that we could do and so on. Purpose is important as we age. Alhamdulillah, our deen gives us purpose. It's good to keep them connected to things that they enjoy doing. If they love walking, if they love nature, if they love your children, keep them close to the things they enjoy. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to enable them. You don't want to be the only way they can get to places. End of life is something we have to prepare for. A simple question is, where would you like to be buried? Most people don't want to talk about that, but it's important to talk about because it's going to happen to all of us, young or old. So get to know what their wishes are. There are documents, and I think Sheikh Joe talked about that. This is very important. Don't undermine that area. It's important to know, things like, I may have important things to me, like what happens with any money that I leave. Don't trust that people who are close to you are going to make the right decisions. And when I say right decisions, I mean decisions that are in line with our Sharia and decisions that are in line with your values, what you value. So let's say you're going to donate 30%. What do you donate it to? So it's important to get to know what their wishes are, because they may not be able to tell you at some point. They may not be in a condition where they can tell you what they would like to happen, or what they would like for you to choose for them. Make sure you are designated as someone who can make decisions on their behalf. All these are things you should really become familiar with. Probably Dr. Joe or Sheikh Joe talked about durable power of attorney, living will, advance directives. Do not resuscitate is very important. So if the paramedics come in your home and you are on the ground and you are not breathing, they will try to resuscitate you. And if you are 90 years old and maybe you are someone who doesn't want to be resuscitated, you have to clearly define that in writing. You have to let them know, please don't pound on my chest, break my ribs, and cause me to die in such a horrible way where I deal with a lot of pain. It's okay to let me go. It's okay to let me die. So that may be important for you. I think it is, but you have to define, you have to tell people, because don't trust that this system will do for you what you wish to be done, right? You have to make decisions, and there are certain documents that they have to abide by. The post, the bottom one, this is pretty much the most important and standard document, because it's called Physician of Life Sustaining Treatment. Physician order of life-sustaining treatment. The post form is a form that you can sign and your doctor signs that says what you would like to happen. Would you like to be resuscitated, intubated? Are they going to shove things down your throat, open your throat, trying to get you to breathe, or put you on life support? Things, the medical system here wants to do every intervention they can. And obviously, it makes money, right? So they want to keep you alive for as long as possible. Even if you are in a coma, maybe they'll give you like 6 months living on life support. And obviously, or maybe you don't want that. So you need to specify these things for yourself and for your parents. So moving forward, don't shy away from asking for help. If you feel you are overwhelmed with caring for someone, get help from the outside. Continue to learn about aging and plan ahead. So as I said, you having the right information is going to be a good way to help your parents. Learn about resources available in your community. There's a lot of resources here, subhanAllah, there's so much resources. There's senior centers that have all these activities, and there's a lot of ways for seniors to have transportation that is free or very affordable. Some cities give you taxi vouchers. There's just a lot of things that we potentially don't know that we need to seek information on. Become a local resource for others. So as you learn these things, help other people. Help them with information, frankly, volunteering in the community. Volunteer at a senior center. Volunteering is one of the best ways for you to actually bring happiness to your life. When you help others, you make them happy, it makes you happy. It's a natural, result. And I feel like one of the important things we should do as a Muslim community based on our faith is to practically be part of the fabric of helping others in this community, Muslim or not. You have to do your part, feeding homeless, whether it's this or that, and this will allow you to actually learn a lot more about these things that you will not learn in your job, maybe, in terms of dealing with people and helping people, and what actually are some of the good resources out there. Jazakumullah khairan. Any questions? The caregivers in the house. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, can you speak louder or? Oh, yes, absolutely. So just give me your email. I'm happy to email it to you. Yes. Yes. Oh, any questions? Okay, feel free, afterwards to Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah help us all be, righteous to our parents. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
استووا أقيموا صفوفكم ولا تختلفوا سدوا الخلل. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ويل لكل همزة لمزة الذي جمع مالا وعدده يحسب أن ماله أخلده كلا لينبذن في الحطمة وما أدراك ما الحطمة نار الله الموقدة التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة في عمد ممددة. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. استغفر الله استغفر الله استغفر الله اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. On behalf of King Fahd Masjid, I would like to thank our dear friend and brother Muhammad Abu Yasin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him for that very useful and practical and beneficial presentation that he gave. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to implement the lessons that were contained, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be from those who are righteous to our parents in all aspects of life. And mashallah, he highlighted a lot of the practical aspects. We talk a lot from the religious perspective about birrul walidain, righteousness towards the parents, from a theological perspective, but alhamdulillah, he presented practical steps on how to show that righteousness towards your parents in a real world manner. And you can really relate some of the topics and some of the issues that he talked about, you can relate it back to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, in a beautiful ayah in Surah Ar-Rum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu alladhi khalaqakum min ضعف ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل من بعد قوة ضعفا وشيبة يخلق ما يشاء وهو العليم القدير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah is the one who created you in a state of weakness. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put you into this world, you came into this world in a state of weakness. A baby is weak, not able to do anything on his own. And then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you strength. So when you reached an age, when you became a teenager and when you reach your 20s and your 30s, you become strong. But then after that, if you live a longer life, when you get into your 60s, 70s, or even past